Well, welcome and thank you for joining NCMA today as we talk about everything certifications. We are going to wait just a minute as I do this intro to allow everyone the opportunity to join us so that they don't miss anything that we're about to talk about. Again, we're very delighted to have you here today. And as NCMA's CEO, it is my honor to have this conversation with you along with Dr. John Wilkinson. As you are aware, the NCMA certification programs are integral to your career growth in contract management and acquisition-related functions. Participating in this webinar today is an important step towards your career advancement. During this presentation, we will review background information on our certification program, and I'm very delighted to be able to detail our newest certification, the Certified Contract Management Associate, or CCMA. We also want to make sure we hear from you, so be certain to post your questions in the chat box, in the Q&A box, and we will answer as many as possible during our time together. With that said, I'd like to introduce Dr. John Wilkinson, an amazing part of our team and someone who has great depth and knowledge of our practice. So over to you, John.
Thank you very much, Craig. It's a tremendous honor for me to be here and to be part of this webinar and to talk about the certification program, because the certification program has always excited me. And as Craig pointed out, it's an integral part of professional development. And so we want to help you in your professional development so you can actually get better at your jobs. Now here you see the agenda. It looks quite busy, but we should have plenty of time for you to be able to answer questions along the way and even at the end. So I'm not going to go through the bullets here, but we'll hit each one of these slides as we go through. Of course, ever since NCMA was founded in 1959, it's been entirely focused on your professional development as a contract manager. And this again, is intended to help you get better results at your job. There are almost 20,000 members in NCMA right now, and the certification program has 4 nationally recognized certifications, and we'll be going through each one of those. The CPCM itself, we consider to be the gold standard of all contract management type certifications. And it was just recently accredited by the American National Standards Institute just a couple weeks ago. So we were quite proud of that, but that's not the end of the accreditation. We're moving forward with other certifications to be accredited as well, and I'll mention those down the road. But as you are involved in certification, you also are open to a lot of education and network building opportunities to help you develop and your competence as you go along, because certification, while it's important, it's just one of those milestones that you achieve, and then you look for that recertification. So to me, yes, certification is very important, but also how many times have you been recertified? That is an indicator also of your competence. So here is what we call the contract management competence bridge, where we have the contract management standard. For those of you who are not familiar with it, it's a free download out on NCMA's website under standards and practices. But it's a 20-page document, and I'll be getting into a little bit more about this in a few minutes. But it is an ANSI approved American National Standard, and this was a consensus-based document to come up with the competencies and job tasks involved in contract management. That 20-page document leads into the 400-page contract management body of knowledge, of which the CPCM is based upon. And that influences your training, your work experience, and your education. And of course, those 3 areas are the requirements for NCMA certification, and leads into the program and back to the standard. So there's a cycle there. There's a bridge of competence that we like to refer to. Now here I want to spend a little time to go through each one of the certification and the requirements. And we'll start at the bottom, as Craig mentioned, with the newest certification, the Certified Contract management associate, that is entirely based on the contract management standard that I mentioned. In order to qualify for this certification, you need either a 1 year of experience in contract management or a 4-year degree. And then you need an additional 40 hours of training. And you can then sit for the 2-hour exam, and all 90 of those questions come straight from that contract management standard. Now, when you do get your certification there, there's a 3-year recertification cycle. So in 3 years, you're expected to produce evidence of 40 CPE. And then every even cycle, you're expected to repass the exam. So if you were certified in 2021 as a CCMA, in 3 years, 2024, all you have to do is produce 40 hours of evidence of training. But then in 6 years, you would need to also provide, along with the 40 hours of training, you have to repass the exam. The reason for that is because the standard of which this certification is based, NCMA is required to reconfirm that standard every 5 years. So we want to be sure that whoever holds this CCMA is up to speed on the changes. And we consider this CCMA to be the universal standard. This is the gateway certification to all other certifications. Now you don't have to take this in any particular order, but we do recommend starting with the CCMA and then building to the others. If you already have a CPCM, I would recommend you test yourself on this, because you may be quite hopefully impressed by the content, and hopefully encourage your workforce and those around you to pursue the CCMA. Moving up to the next one, the Certified Commercial Contract Manager. That is, the CCCM is based on the Uniform Commercial Code, and along with it is the Certified Federal Contract Manager based on the Federal Acquisition Regulation. Both of those require a 4-year degree, but it's waived if you don't have that, with 5 years of experience and 24 college hours. You need 2 years of experience. You need 80 CPE for each of these certifications. And then once you qualify there, then it's a 3-hour exam with 150 questions. So for the CCCM, all the questions come from the Uniform Commercial Code. For the CFCM, all the questions come from the FAR. The recertification cycle for these 2 certifications is 5 years. So at the end of 5 years, you have to produce evidence of having achieved 60 hours of training. That's 1 hour a month average over the 60 months. So hopefully you can accomplish that. Then the gold standard, as we mentioned, the Certified Professional Contract Manager, that's based on the SimBox, that 400-page document. All 180 questions come from the SimBox. You must have a 4-year degree from a regionally accredited school, non-waiverable. You must have 5 years of experience, non-waiverable, and you must have 120 hours of training, non-waiverable. So you must meet those tight requirements for the CPCM. Now for this, once you do meet the requirements, this is a 4-hour exam with 180 questions. And within this exam, there are scenario-based questions. So each of the pre-award, award, and post-award areas have 2 scenarios each, with 5 scenario questions off of each one. And so that many people feel are quite challenging. So once you're certified there, that also is a 5-year recertification cycle. But for this, you'll need to provide evidence of 100 CPE, and that is effective in 2026. This is a recent change. So those of you who are going to be certified or recertified this year, in 5 years, you'll need to provide evidence of 100 CPEs. Those who fall for recertification in between, it's still only 60. For instance, I am due to recertify my CPCM in 2023, so I only need to provide 60 CPE. The recertification application won't be updated until 2026, so you'll see then when you'll have to provide additional evidence. So that is the overall scheme of how the certification program is set up and the qualifications for certification and recertification.
John, before you move on, we had other questions coming in, and please keep posting your questions, attendees, to the Q&A box. But a question that popped up was, what does non-waiverable mean?
That means you either have that requirement or you don't. For instance, going to the CPCM, if your 4-year degree is not from a regionally accredited school, you cannot sit for this exam. You must have a 4-year degree from a regionally accredited school. If you don't have it, then you can sit for the CFCM or the CCCM, because there are waivers provided with the 5 years of experience and 24 college hours. But those 24 college hours must be regionally accredited.
Great, thank you.
Okay. And here's what we affectionately call our certification pyramid. You can see that we expect that over time, as you build your confidence through continuous learning, you will move from the CCMA up through the CFCM, CCCM, and CPCM. And if you missed it earlier, we consider the CCMA to be the universal certification and the CPCM to be the gold standard of all contract management, supply chain management, anything that falls within the scope of contract management. This is the gold standard. Some recommended milestones to consider as you're going through your career. If you're at the beginning or a journeyman level, you should have the CCMA in your back pocket. As you transition to the expert practitioner, you should have the CFCM or CCCM, whichever one applies to you. Or in many cases, both may apply to your position. And then as the expert practitioner, you should seriously consider having your CPCM. Here are some phases that we all go through as we're pursuing our certification and recertification. First off, in phase 1, we're all trying to gather our education, training, and experience requirements. So we can sit for the exam in phase 2. We test our knowledge there. We become certified in phase 3. And then once we become certified, we need to continue with the recertification. So we're continuing to learn in phase 4. And then we apply and we get recertified, continuously being recertified and building our confidence. Now, NCMA certifications are what we call stackable, where there is a recommended entry with the CCMA, a middle with the CFCM and CCCM, and the top level being the CPCM. However, you can get these certifications in any order. I can tell you that I received my CPCM before I received my CFCM. But anyway, they are stackable and progressive in the expected amount of confidence that you should have in order to achieve them. The certifications are also portable. If your certification is active and transferable no matter what your employment status. So many people transition from buyer to seller, seller to buyer, and anything in between. It doesn't matter if you're a prime contractor, a subcontractor, if you're a purchaser, doesn't matter. They are transferable. So you don't lose your certification depending on what your job is. Also, NCMA certifications are voluntary. Achieving third-party certifications indicates your professional development is on track with acceptable education, training, and experience requirements. So the common characteristic, and I can tell you this is based on studies outside of NCMA, that third-party certified contract managers want to become better contract managers. Anybody who has a third-party certification want to become better at their jobs. And something of note here is that when certifications are a requirement of your job, the only way to stand out is by not being certified. So to stand out, to be considered for those special assignments and possible succession planning, voluntarily go out and get your certifications. So now we talk about the new Certified Contract Management Association, or associate that we've promised you. Again, we consider this to be an entry-level certification because there really is no means of helping people just coming out of college or having just 1 year of experience to show that they are committed to the contract management profession. So this will help them as they start off on their journey. And it should be reassuring to those hiring officials when they see that CCMA at the end of the person's name, that this person understands the contract management life cycle. They understand what's going on between the buyer and the seller. They understand the terms. Now, they may not have all the practice and the experience that the person will do, but they show some promise that at least they understand the terms and they're ahead of somebody who may not have the CCMA. So who should pursue the CCMA? Again, anybody with a 4-year degree with less than 1 year experience. Buyers and sellers with at least 1 year of experience without a regionally accredited 4-year degree. Buyers interested in understanding how their actions impact sellers, and sellers interested in understanding how their actions impact buyers. And anyone who's interested in understanding the foundational aspects of the contract management life cycle. And I'll explain a little bit about that so you get a little bit of a clearer understanding, because again, this certification exam is based on the contract management standard. And the purpose of that standard is to describe contract management in terms of the processes created through the integration and interaction of job tasks and competencies and the purposes they serve. So that's a mouthful, but it's in essence to understand how everything works together. And just kind of going through the numbers over here, there are 3 life cycle phases: the pre-award, award, and post-award, beginning, middle, and end. There are 7 guiding principles that have been determined that all contract managers need to abide by throughout the entire life cycle. That would be things like skills and roles, contract principles, standards of conduct, regulatory compliance, situational assessment, team dynamics, and communication and documentation. And there are 5 domains, and I'll talk about that on the next slide, because the 5 domains essentially define what contract management is. There are 20 competencies in the standard and 132 job tasks. I should put 132 plus or minus 10%. I counted them twice, came up with the same number, so I'm sticking with that number. So back on the domains are the areas within the contract life cycle that produces significant contract management outcomes. And those outcomes are described in what is defined as contract management in the standard, would be the actions of a contract manager to develop solicitations, develop offers, form contracts, perform contracts, and close contracts. And this image presents contract management from the beginning for the first job task under develop solicitation is to help the customer define their requirements all the way through the end to close contract, where the final task is to finalize the contract. So in between, you have the 5 domains that will develop the solicitation, offer, contract, contract performance, and close contract. So there are more details in the standard, and I invite you to go out and pull this down. Again, free download under standards and practices on the NCMA website. So now I know you're anxious to complete your application. All NCMA applications are online, so you go out there and find the one that you want. So you submit the application, you pay the fee. Your application is reviewed by the staff, and please give the staff 15 business days to complete their review. If it's approved, you're going to receive an email giving you the next step on how to schedule your exam. If it's not approved, you're going to get an email detailing where your application deficiencies are and what you should do to correct those deficiencies. So the application fees, you can see them here, and you can see those red asterisks at the end of the CPCM, CFCM, CCCM. Effective July 1st, those application fees will be going up, $5 each for members and $10 each for non-members. Everything else is going to remain the same. The criterion test, so you pay an application fee to NCMA. Then when you schedule your exam, you're going to be paying Criterion, the test center company that we use, for your exam fee, 125 domestic and 150 international. And we do have both on-site, where you can go to a test center like we always have, or you can do it online, remote proctoring from your home or any other place of convenience. And talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. And recertification applications remain the same. So this year we started online proctored exams. So to give you another feature, give you another means of taking the exam. Now, right now, the OLP, online proctored exams, is only approved for the CCMA, CFCM, and CCCM. This feature will become activated for the CPCM once we go through the accreditation process with ANSI. So the CPCM was accredited on April 20th. Soon after, we submitted our application to get our OLP process approved. Hopefully by June 1st, we'll have that approved, but we'll make that announcement for the CPCM later. Some of the benefits, of course, comfort of home. There's no additional cost for taking an OLP exam. Now the restrictions, and this could prevent some of you from wanting to do this. First off is the requirements for your computer. All of those are listed on the Criterion website. Because they change them, we don't want to specify on the NCMA website and then have them conflict with criterions. So probably a biggie here is for those of you, especially in the government, federal government, it's unlikely you'd be allowed to take an OLP exam, because Criterion, what it does is that when you set things up, they install their Sentry program into your computer. So it locks down your computer, so you have no outside access to anything except for the exam. And the only way to get out of it is when you finish the exam or it's terminated in some manner. So be sure to get approval from your bosses if you're going to use a company laptop. We highly discourage you using a company laptop. It should be your personal laptop. There are no breaks allowed. Some of you may be able to get through the 2-hour exam, but when we do approve the CPCM exam, remember that's 4-hour exam. You cannot go to the restroom. You cannot do anything. You cannot eat. You cannot drink. You cannot leave the screen at all, or the exam will be terminated on the spot. You're not allowed to have any kind of aids, so please leave your Google glasses in the other room, because at the beginning of the process, the online proctor will ask first to see your identification, so you'll provide that to that person, and then they'll want you to do what is called a 360 scan. So you'll have to pick up your laptop or your camera and show the proctor everything around you. If you have too much material sitting around, you're not going to be able to start. So things that can enter or end the exam would be leaving at any time. If you lean out of view, if you're doing any kind of talking, if there are multiple people in the room. So even if you're at home and a child comes in, needs some type of help, hopefully that by itself won't end it, but it's at the proctor's discretion to end the exam if they want to. If you're doing any appropriate keystrokes, even though, as I said, you don't have access to anything, if you're even trying, that could end the exam. And if your camera is unfocused or out of position, that could end it. There are other things that can do it, and they're all spelled out on the NCMA website.
And just to jump in here, John, to reiterate that, we are following the standards and best practices as defined by ANSI. So many of the things you hear here are not us intending to be overly difficult. The online proctoring exam, as John mentioned, has some very detailed steps. We encourage you, if you want to use that option, to read the directions very carefully. The intent here, because if you go to a testing center, we are able to monitor and prepare the environment so we know how the exam is doing in that situation. When you're doing it on a laptop or at home or wherever you are in a remote setting, we have limited ability to control things. And ANSI really wants us to make sure we protect that exam. And that's why the situation. So I just reiterate that there are extra requirements for OLP. We want to have as many options available to you, but just recognize that might be a tougher option just because of those requirements that are in place.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Craig. And also, if there is some type of dispute, the proctor terminates the exam on you. All sessions are recorded, so you will have your opportunity to provide your side of the story. The proctor will have their opportunity to provide their side of the story. NCMA will take the video, review it, and then come up with a final determination. So the final determination is on NCMA, not criteria. So please keep that in mind. Also, if you decide, if you're not bound by any one particular method. So supposing you did the OLP first time and for whatever reason you didn't pass the exam, you can do the on-site next time. You don't have to do anything different. You just accept for how you schedule. So but all that is addressed in the email. So when you get the email, you have the option of on-site or OLP, and your criterion account is good either way. So you have 3 opportunities per application. So you can go back and forth, stick with one way. It's totally up to you. So how do you prepare for these exams for the CCMA? And I want you to note here that in each one of these blocks for each exam, there is a handbook. These are fairly new since about the beginning of the year. And I would definitely encourage you to go out and look at the handbook for each of these exams, because what you're going to find, not only a process on how to go through the entire certification process and how to recertify, and what may happen if your certification gets terminated, but also you're going to find some things relevant to the exam as far as the number of questions per section of the source document, in this case, the CCMA. It'll tell you how many questions per competency. There's going to be an exam content matrix for each one of the exams, so you'll get a good idea of what is on the exam. And you're also going to see some sample questions for each one, so you know what to expect as far as them being multiple choice. All NCMA questions are multiple choice with 4 options, and of course only 1 correct option. So and they're sourced, again, like I said, we can point where each question comes from, whether it's from the CMS, the SimBox, the FAR, or the UCC. So if you have any kind of dispute, we can work with you on what's going on there. And I want to point out on the CFCM that this is FAR based. This is the top level FAR. No supplements, no executive orders, no deviations, no nothing. Just the top level FAR. So a lot of people get the thresholds confused. They think that whatever agency they're working in, that their agency supplement is the one that rules. No, it's at the FAR level, the top level. So please keep that in mind as you're preparing for the exam. So for the CPCM, in the handbook, SimBox 6. I've seen some people who say they study the SimBox 5. There's a radical difference between 5 and 6. So if you're using an old 5, you're doing yourself a disservice. There is an online prep course that NCMA sponsors every quarter. So you might want to consider looking into that. But the CFCM, again, the handbook, read the FAR, understand the FAR. And again, the handbook will tell you where you need to put your emphasis as far as which FAR parts are deemed to be the most important, and so the higher the importance of the FAR part, the more questions you're going to have. And there's an online prep course for the CFCM, and there's a study guide that's available. For the CCCM, again, handbook, the Uniform Commercial Code, and because the Uniform Commercial Code can be different in every state, Louisiana actually doesn't use the UCC, but there are a lot of variations of the UCC, but for standardization purposes, for the CCCM, all questions are sourced from the Cornell website. So that's the one you should use to study. And more resources, there are practice exams available, and you might want to look at the chapter study group guide. Pull together a study group in your chapter. Recertification planning. First off, certification demonstrates a commitment to the profession and continuous learning, and recertification reemphasizes that. But in all cases, once you do get your certification, begin now planning for recertification. Many people say, wow, shoot, I've got 5 years before I have to recertify. But unfortunately, too many people wait until the last year. If you, for instance, we were going through a pandemic, or you could be deployed, whether you're active duty or whether you're in the military, or a lot of civilians do deploy. But what did you do in those first 4 years? I can tell you now that NCMA has no procedure to reinstate expired certifications. So if your certification expires, the NCMA staff will be happy to direct you to the online application so you can start the process over and take one of our great exams. So the only way you're going to get your certification back is to sit for the exam again. So please do not let all the hard work you put into certification go away because you didn't meet recertification requirements. So, questions and answers. Do we have anything out there that anybody wants to ask about?
Yes, John. Sorry, I was busy trying to answer some of those right now. So we had quite a few questions around the education requirements, and particularly the CPCM and the requirement of a degree. Many feel, as you would imagine, they have 20, 30 years of experience, and they may not have a degree, at least as defined there. In your answer about why that is, I would also like you to help everyone, help everyone understand our certification oversight body. A lot of these requirements are assessed by a group of volunteers that are there as part of the certification oversight body to represent the test taker and the certification holder, as well as the employers that hire those certification holders. So can you talk a little bit then again about that requirement, particularly for the CPCM of a degree? Where is it waiverable in any of the other conversations or any of the other certifications? And then maybe a little bit about how the COB came to that requirement.
Okay, let me get here. First off, on the certification oversight body that you mentioned, the COB. Yes, there are right now 10 subject matter experts with a blend of buyers and sellers representing all communities, not just federal, but we also have state and local buyers. We have small, mid, and large businesses representing sellers. We have people involved in subcontract management, and actually the person who is the chair is a professor at the Naval Postgraduate School, Dr. Rene Rendon. Many of you may know him. The COB was established in October 2019, and their job is to go through and make sure that all the requirements are where contract managers would expect those requirements to be, meaning that we hold the CPCM in high regard, as I've mentioned several times, the gold standard. What makes this the gold standard is because it has high requirements. And yes, I understand those who have 20 or 30 years and may not have had the opportunity to get a 4-year degree, or they went through a school that's not regionally accredited. The CPCM requirements have been studied, and the COB has, over the past year, revalidated every one of those requirements. In fact, it was them who increased the recertification CPE from 60 to 100 because they wanted it to be distinguished from the CFCM and CCCM. They also developed the requirements for the CCMA, so it falls neatly underneath as an entry level. So it is validated, and it has been revalidated over the years. And again, these are subject matter experts who have determined what the requirements for each one of these certifications will be. Once these, and they don't do it in a vacuum. Once it goes through them, anything having to do with the requirements has to go first, be approved by the CEO, Craig Conrad, and then it must go through the NCMA Board of Directors. So everything you see on this chart has been validated and revalidated by the COB, the CEO, and the NCMA Board of Directors. And this is where NCMA as an entity believes the requirements should be. I'm not sure if I got everything there. Was there anything else there that I missed, Craig?
Oh, no, you covered it well. I think the other area that, while we're on this slide, that we had quite a few questions on about where are the other waiverable opportunities related to experience? Obviously, when we talked about degrees, you just mentioned that, but which of the certification programs offer an ability to waiver the experience?
There are no waivers for experience, and your experience must align to the SimBox competencies. Now, you don't have to buy a SimBox to understand what the competencies are. They are in the appendix, the last page of the CPE guide, which is a free download, also under NCMA's standards and practices. So you can see there what those are. Now, for the CCMA, it's not a waiver, it's an either or. So you can have the 1 year of experience, or you can have the 4-year degree. So somebody coming fresh out of college with no experience can qualify for the CCMA exam. Or on the other hand, somebody with 1 year of experience and no college whatsoever can sit for the CCMA exam. So that's not a waiver, that's an either or area. So there's no waiver for the CPCM, CFCM, CCCM experience, nor for the CPE expected for each one of those areas.
Thank you. So we're getting some questions about the, you mentioned about the testing requirements for the OLP, or the online. Those are very strict, of course, because those are conditions that are harder to control from a proctoring perspective. But in terms of the test centers, what kind of things are allowed there? Can someone get up from an exam? Can they drink water while they're at their desk?
Drinking water may be allowed. I don't want to vouch for that, but you can get up for a restroom. You must go to the proctor, let that proctor know. You will have a live proctor in the room with you. So you go to the proctor, say, I need to go to the restroom. You cannot take any material with you at all to the restroom. Of course, that restroom is a controlled environment. So you can go to the restroom and come back. So you are allowed breaks on site. As far as drinking, again, that could be dependent on the test center, because they're taking a chance with you sitting there with a drink and hovering over their equipment. And
for those in the process, if you have an approved application to be able to set the exam, as John mentioned, those testing sites that we use, those are for the in-person testing sites, uses Criterion. So there is a very detailed website available through Criterion. Again, if you have an approved application, you'll receive a link to it that will tell you all of the unique situations of every single testing center as well. So we encourage you to go there. A question that relates, John, to the pyramid of certification, as we internally like to call it. And the question has come up about sort of how does that information, we say that they're stackable, but does all of the information in each one of those certifications really roll up into the CPCM, or are they covering different areas along the way?
Yes and no. I can tell you that the CCMA is based on the contract management standard. The SimBox, the contract management body of knowledge, is also based on the standard. It expands the best practices on those competencies found in the standard. So the CPCM is based on the SimBox. So CPCM and CCMA are linked, definitely. So you'll see very familiar terms shared across both exams. But I can tell you that you will not find common questions on each one. Now the CCCM and CFCM those would be the regulatory guidance that for your job. So the CPCM and CCMA is based on contract management, how you practice contract management, where the other two, CFCM and CCCM, are based on the rules and regulations that you are required to follow. So in my mind, if you have a combination of especially if you're working in federal government, a combination of the CPCM and CFCM is a tremendous 1-2 punch in certification.
Great, John.
Lacking that, if you have the CCMA and CFCM, that is also a very strong punch. Assuming you have less than 5 years experience.
Great, thank you. So again, it's not necessarily a roll-up in the CPCM. There are different questions for each exam, and they cover somewhat different content. We are receiving a lot of questions about what qualifies for CPE. Do we maintain a list of other CPE providers? A couple notes for everybody. Our CPE is not the same CPE as NASBA, the accounting group. We just use the term CPE. So it's not a direct equation. The CPE guide, our book or guide that we offer, is very clear as to what counts, because we don't pre-approve anyone else's offering. It should be, though, and many providers out there are starting to list the CMS, or the contract management standard, and where that fits in, and the SimBox. And those providers include those that are already approved for DAU equivalency. Many of the DAU courses line up quite well, as well as those from FAI and other providers. We don't keep a list. Again, it's a wide field. We strongly recommend you look at the CPE guide. You'll see the links that have been posted in various places to have a look at those. Remember, you should always be able to map something back, a course or what you've done, back to a SimBox competency, and be able to demonstrate it there. It will get assessed at submission. So when you submit your application, it will get reviewed at that time. Due to the volume, unfortunately, we're unable to process requests where you submit out of cycle. Really just put it all together in your package, and we will take it from there. So the other question, and before I turn it back over to you, John, to talk about the types of things that qualify for CPE. Again, that CPE guide is all of you listening in here, that's what you need to be pointing to. For those of you who are NCMA members, there are a lot of free CPE are included as a member benefit. You can replay a lot of things if you weren't able to participate live, and to be able to get credit for it. So if you go into the NCMA website and log in, you'll be able to see a lot of those credits. All of our chapters provide courses, training, events, and they're often they qualify. The chapter will tell you whether or not it qualifies. Again, they know that whether it fits the CPE guide or not. So the NCMA chapters also fit in there as well. So John, if you could give a little bit more information from the CPE guide about what qualifies. I know above and beyond the alignment to the SimBox, are there other types of things that people should be considering?
Yeah, it's a great point. And first off, we talked about CPE, and it's possible that you can qualify with your CPE with nothing coming from NCMA. We'd love to have you have a lot of training from NCMA because we know that qualifies, but it's not a requirement that you take anything from NCMA to meet your CPE requirements. Now, in the CPE guide, one very important thing to keep in mind is that CPE expires after 10 years. So if you took a course 15 years ago, that's not going to qualify for CPE requirements. Of course, being there, sitting in any type of environment and getting a course completion certificate that is really beneficial if you go to NCMA chapters or any other professional association chapter. Be sure you get some type of evidence that you were there and that you participated in the event. Now, a lot of people are on the receiving end, but then there are many people who are on the doling out end, meaning that you're on the other side of the lectern. You're the one who's instructing, you're the one who's developing courses, you're the one who's writing published articles. You get CPE for each of those events, and it's all listed how much you earn in the CPE guide. There's also a section on things that do not qualify. For instance, on-the-job training at work, informal things like that. Product demonstrations do not count. So again, become a student of this CPE guide so you know how to target or how to gather evidence. And especially if you're a chapter leader, how do you help the attendees of your events? How can they provide evidence to NCMA that for their certification or recertification purposes? So there are a lot of ways to get it. In fact, we just recently added just being on the job can earn you 2 CPEs per year in your recertification effort, not for certification, but for recertification. So once you get to certification, just being employed in a contract management area can earn you 2 CPEs per year. So that's 10 of however many you need to qualify.
We had a question about the SimBox. I believe people might have different versions out there that they may have the SimBox 5 and what changed. I know you talked a little bit about it, but could you tell us when the SimBox 6 was released and a little bit about any of the crosswalk material that we might have on that?
Okay, the SimBox 6 was published last summer, or was it the summer before? So there was a transition period for the CPCM exams. So we gave you an opportunity to 5 or 6, but that phased out. So the biggest things were a lot of the titles of the competencies. So instead of business development, it would be pre-sales for the seller. There are some other changes, name changes. So if you study the SimBox 5, I don't know, I would feel reluctant that you might do well, but you could. I mean, if you really understood the flow and the intent of each of the competencies and how the job tasks blend together to produce a solicitation or a proposal or a contract or performance or how to close out a contract, you may do well. But I would really get my hands on a SimBox 6 and study that.
Connecting to that, there was a question about how frequently does the SimBox update? I know you mentioned a little bit, but can you talk about its relationship to the contract management standard, which we all know is a nationally recognized third-party accredited standard or approved standard? So can you talk a little bit about that relationship again?
Okay, be happy to. Yeah, the standard, we had an unapproved ANSI standard prior to this one. When you download this, you'll see on the front, it says second edition. The first edition drove a change to the SimBox, and that was SimBox 5. And that drove a change, in turn, drove a change to the CPCM. Now, it was only about a 2-year turnaround where the contract management standard became ANSI approved. And with the changes in that, it drove a change to the SimBox. So there's only about a 2-year turnaround from 5 to 6. And that in turn drove changes to the CPCM exam. Right now, there's nothing on the horizon. Because the standard is on a 5-year cycle with ANSI. Right now, the best we can say is we're on a 5-year cycle. So probably in about 3 years, there will be changes. We'll be going to SimBox 7, CMS version 3, SimBox 7, which will drive a change to the CPCM and the CCMA exams. The CFCM and CCCM only change when the FAR and the UCC change.
Great, and John, it looks like we are up on our time. We want to make sure that we get back to as many of these questions as we can. So we are going to review our FAQs and make sure that we address more of these for you, many of the questions that you've had, so that we can direct you back to those FAQ pages. Many of those conversations are covered there. One of the questions that, of course, you may have still is which one is the most appropriate for me to start with. John mentioned that, so we encourage you to get the replay of this. It will be available from the website at ncmahq.org/webinar. And that will take you to the page where you'll be able to find these things. And also the handouts are from this session. So again, you can go back and replay and listen to these, what John and I have shared here. Also, we'll direct you to the FAQ site as well to get more information about many of the questions you've had. Delighted that NCMA is part of your professional journey. Many in our community have worked very hard to make this happen. John, as you may know, other than his role with NCMA, came from practice. Other than being a PhD and all the other things that he's done in his life, he has come from practice. We have many others like him. He mentioned Dr. Renee Rendon from NPS that are part of our process. These are all very important people and very plugged into practice. So rest assured you are on the right journey, on the right path here with NCMA. And with that, we conclude today's call. NCMA staff are always available. You can go to ncmahq.org/contact to either chat live with someone or reach out and connect via email. With that, thank you all and have a very good rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.